But let's go through some of your failures. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Access is recognized.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just gonna make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that
That's
you are
false.
the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people, and even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
Representative Jasmine Crockett just delivered one of the most unfiltered and impassioned takedowns we've seen in a congressional hearing. And this wasn't just about politics or partisan squabbling. This was about accountability, truth, and the glaring double standards within federal law enforcement under leadership that seems more interested in optics than justice. From the very first sentence, Crockett came in with facts, not fluff. She reminded the room and the nation that Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, was appointed by none other than Donald Trump. That detail matters because it frames everything that follows. Here you have a Trump-appointed FBI director, now serving under a department riddled with controversy, defending decisions that often appear politically motivated or selectively enforced. But Crockett's criticism wasn't about partisanship. It was about performance, about failure, and about the lived experience of millions of Americans, particularly Black Americans, who feel unprotected, unseen, and unheard by the very agencies that are supposed to defend their rights. When she said, "I don't know who feels safe in this country except for white supremacists," it wasn't hyperbole. It was a hard truth. She was talking about an America where threats against members of Congress have skyrocketed, where extremist violence has become almost routine, and yet federal agencies still struggle to call it what it is: domestic terrorism driven by right-wing extremism. Let's pause on that point, because Crockett did something very few do in these hearings. She documented her case in real time. She entered into the record multiple examples of Republican lawmakers, yes, Republicans, who have been receiving death threats for simply voting against Jim Jordan for Speaker. That is the very definition of political terrorism, intimidation meant to coerce democratic behavior. And yet, where is the urgency from the FBI? Where is the full-throated condemnation of this extremist movement that is tearing the country apart from within? Crockett made it clear, it's not just about what the FBI is doing, it's about what it isn't doing. She questioned the Bureau's competence, its priorities, and its moral clarity. She pointed to the agency's sluggish staffing, its diversion of resources toward immigration enforcement rather than counterterrorism, and its ongoing internal purges of career professionals, all of which seemed to serve political interests rather than the public good. And then came the line that crystallized it all. "You were posted up having some fancy dinner, taking a victory lap." That was a dagger. Crockett wasn't just calling out incompetence, she was exposing the performance of power, the showmanship, the self-congratulation, the political theater that replaces real accountability. It's a searing critique of how leadership optics often take precedence over public service. But her message was deeper than that. It was about what it feels like to live in America when institutions fail you, when the system that should protect democracy instead enables extremism. Her perspective as a Black woman wasn't incidental, it was central, because her lived experience underscores exactly what's at stake when law enforcement agencies refuse to confront the reality of white supremacy head-on. She tied it all back to the moral foundation of governance: safety, equality, justice, and trust. Without those, a democracy becomes fragile. And in her words and tone, Crockett reminded the nation that we are teetering dangerously close to that edge. Meanwhile, Patel, as we've seen before, sat stoic, insulated by bureaucracy, dodging questions, and relying on procedural shields. And that silence speaks volumes. Because when oversight is met with deflection, democracy suffers. When accountability is met with arrogance, corruption festers. Crockett's fiery questioning wasn't just cathartic, it was necessary. It was the sound of democracy refusing to go quietly. And whether or not anyone in that hearing room wanted to admit it, she said what millions of Americans feel, that the people in power too often fail to protect the people who need protection the most. And that final takeaway, that urgency, that conviction, is exactly what defines leadership. Because leadership isn't about decorum or calm tones in the face of chaos. It's about truth. It's about justice. It's about demanding better from those who swore to serve us. Jasmine Crockett just reminded Washington and the world what that looks like.